What is up, my Lorcana Goons, and welcome back to the Lorcana Goons channel. My name is Kevin. We're joined with Zach today so that we can go over the top 16 deck lists from the Pixelborn Cross-Continental Challenge. If you didn't know, Pavel, the creator of Pixelborn, which was an online client for Lorcana, decided to host a challenge for North America versus EU, and we have the top 8 players from both sides. Basically, there was a voting system of the best players from both sides, and we have the deck lists that they're using for this tournament, and we're going to show you these deck lists with the pairing that they had to play against. So, Zach, anything you want to say before we start off on these awesome deck lists for some of these top players in the Lorcana competitive space?
How's it going, Kevin? Yeah, this event's pretty nice. I like how we get to have a little bit of something to watch, something to look forward to right before we go into the EU Continentals. But yeah, these decks are very interesting, and we are starting off with a blue-yellow aggro deck. This one was built and is being played by Time, aka Tim. He decided to, I think, kind of bring the only off-meta deck, I would say, in the whole tournament. Right, Kevin?
Yeah, from what it looks like, this deck is definitely spicy. We did see Spicy with some pretty interesting stuff there too. We'll go over that eventually. But yeah, Time for sure bringing this blue-yellow deck that we're actually watching a little while ago as he played against R&B's Blue Steel. They're going into, I believe, a game 3 from what it's looking like. But yeah, I want to start off going over the one-drops. It's an aggro deck, as you can see. It looks like we've got some heroes with some aggressive one-drops like Daisy Duck, Kita, and Nala. Those are some pretty strong characters to start questing with in the early game. You can follow it up with Anna, which will have an extra lore if you have a hero on board. A Duke Weaseltown, which is pretty cool. You can quest for 2. He has Ward, so questing for 2 is probably going to land very often. And then for your 3 drops, we got the new Alice. This card coming out in the recent Azurite C set. She's a 3-cost uninkable, 1 strength, 4 willpower that can quest for 2. She has Ward, and when you quest with her, you can give another character Ward and +1 lore. So that's pretty crazy. I think that is a very strong ability when you're playing an aggro deck, especially when you can ready it back up with Sven on curve. That's pretty nutty in my opinion, because then you can give your maybe your Donald Duck Ward an extra lore, or another card like Anna, because she's questing for 2. You got a hero on board, and later on in the game you can slap some Kitas or some Baymaxes, which is my favorite card in this deck list. I'm a big aggro appreciator in the beginning of a format especially, and we even have some locations in this deck. It looks like a deck that you really want to play on curve and really see your 1 on turn 1s and 2 and 3s, etc., right?
Yeah, and I'm very impressed with the amount of inkables. I believe it's 12 total, being the Daisy, Scrooges, and Alice's. So yeah, this is a very well-built deck. I'm very excited to see where it goes into the rest of the tournament. And guys, if you guys aren't aware, it is a 4-round, 8 players in the North America region and 8 players in the European region. They're going at it. It's going to be featured on multiple different Twitch channels, so make sure you guys are following along to see where to watch those games.
Let's check out his opponent, though. This is RMB representing North America with his Blue Steel deck, and that's what RMB's pretty much known for. Blue Steel with Whole New World. I am a big appreciator of this deck list because we got the new Jim Hawkins from the Azurite C, which basically lets you shift into your 5 shiftable Jim Hawkins, your 5-cost Jim Hawkins on turn 3, so you can sing Whole New World early. Also lets you hit with some damage potentially, and in my experience, I have lost many libraries to the shift Jim Hawkins combo. I like this deck, very strong in the meta. I feel like Blue Steel enjoyers can always rely on RMB to cook up some real good spice in the beginning of a format, and I think he has something going here. Zach, what do you think?
There is a lot of removal, which I am a fan of, but it's not overcommitting, which I've come to the realization myself when I'm building decks as of recently. And the curve does kind of fit pretty well. We're not overcompensating with a bunch of low-cost characters. He has the Jim Hawkins and the Magic Brooms is there more as like tools and resources. And I see we're even playing the Diamond or the big Ariel for the Diamond, as well as 3 Tamatoa and 2 Big Simba. I also like the inclusion of the 1 copy of the Zeus. It does allow you to deal with some locations while you do have some pretty beefy characters as well. And we're rounding it all off with 4 Tinkerbell and 2 Grab Your Sword. And we are on wheel in this list. So yeah, RMB, I hope you really pilot this deck and get to the furthest point. I'm starting to like Blue Steel a lot. The deck does very much take over all of the aggro decks. It's one of the best mid range decks that's been around since set one.
Yeah, as a fellow North American, I have to wish R&B all the luck. No offense to anybody, but I want to see our team win. I want to see it. I do want to mention that this deck is playing a lot of outs to Diablo. R&B being on his anti-Diablo vibes lately. He has the Fire the Cannons. We have Zeus. We have the Broom Aerial Cleaner, the Magic Broom, which has evasive on your turn. That's another out to your Diablos. So if you guys are playing Emerald Steel, beware. Your Green Steel players, beware, because you guys have a target on your back with this deck now in the meta. Next up, representing North America, we have Zan Syed, who recently won a DLC. Pretty awesome to see, by the way. Playing Emerald Steel. That's the deck that he used to win the DLC with. Very classic move from Zan Syed, and it's not looking like there's anything too new from this list except for this Pluto. One copy of the Pluto Guard Dog, 4-cost inkable that comes in with 5 strength, 5 willpower, and bodyguard. But if you do damage to Pluto, then he goes back down to 1 strength. But normally this trades very well into a lot of cards. I feel like I've lost multiple characters or even just one Maui into this 4-cost character sometimes, right, dude?
Yeah, so something about the Pluto that my good friend John said, so shout outs to you, John, is when you damage the Pluto, you'll actually put him down to 1 strength. And if you have a song, you can return him to the hand with muses and replay him as a bodyguard. So I think that's really cool.
Wow.
However, there is new cards in the deck that weren't in the list previously. Like we see the Captain Hooks. We are looking at 4 Hidden Cove now. So these are some cards that I've been noticing. And also we dropped Morph down to 2, Ursula down to 3, Anna down to 1. So we're looking at some different card choices overall, and just only the 1 inclusion with the Pluto.
And the 1 dock. Can't forget the 1 dock to just refill your hand a little bit in case of anything, in case you're in a sticky situation. Slap dock, draw 2 cards. Zan had to play against Artabax in this first round, piloting a green-purple deck, which he's pretty much known for. Artabax is a pretty good player from the EU, has done very well in a lot of online tournaments and in-person tournaments as well. So huge shout out to Artabax, and go check out his YouTube channel. I love green-purple, Zach. I love the way this looks. Look how many aggressive cards we have in this deck. 4 Go-Go Tamago, 4 Merlin Goat, 3 of the White Rose, which I think is pretty awesome. And I would even consider the new Genie an aggro card, dude. It feels like this is like Surfer Genie meta, like Surfer Mini. Remember that? It's like Surfer Genie now, bro. I feel like if you can have a Genie difference on the opponent and just keep questing for 2 with this guy, it's doing pretty well. It's a brawl target, but it doesn't matter because all of your other cards are brawl targets too. So if they're using brawl on Genie, then that means you're not using brawl on a rabbit. It means you're not using it on your Peter Pan with evasive, or your 2nd, 3rd, or maybe even 4th Genie. Even the 1-drops are threatening in this deck. And you got the Clarabelle package. Clarabelle's pretty good. You can shift it, quest for 2, and just refill your hand. Even if it just dies on that turn that you shifted it, you just still get to draw at least 2 cards, like a big dock that can contest a Maui, right?
Definitely. I also really like how well curved out it is with the 1s and 2s. I noticed that there were 16 uninkables in this list, and there is only 3 shift lines. We're looking at the 2 Clarabelle and the 1 Ursula. Now, I think there's room to be playing more Ursulas if you expect more Steel songs. However, the characters like the White Rose and the Genies, I think, have to be considered in cutting down more of the late game. And closing out those games, I think, is very important in this deck. And you really want to see a 1, 2, 3 drop. So taking some of the late game cards and adding more of the early game makes more sense right now. Yes, now we're looking at the Amber Steel deck list piloted by Frank Karsten. I very much like the way that this deck list looks. It has some very strong characters like Prince Naveen, Pete, and Lawrence all at 1. And personally, this makes sense. I think it's just trying to find the curve, as in like the 1s, the 2s, the 3s, and you're honestly not overvaluing a lot of different characters in this list. I think you're looking at finding just your Rapunzels on curve as well, and the amount of songs that you have is more to my liking. However, I think that the Bare Necessities could come back. Personally, Gontu at 1 is also something to think about. I would like to see more copies of this card because I really think it's strong in the meta that we're in. Kevin, what are your thoughts on this?
I am also a Gontu fan. Personally, I watched him play. I didn't know he played it at one until just recently. I was watching his match against Brandon DeCandio, which again are both amazing players. Frank actually won the first DLC in Europe, by the way, if you guys didn't know that. He's a Magic the Gathering Hall of Famer. Just a fun fact, So he's kind of a beast. He's a pretty prominent player. But yeah, this was one Gontu really it didn't really get in there. I feel like I don't know if it was win more, but I feel like the moment that came onto the board, it was like, oh, that thing is just gonna quest for four. So there's not that many turns left, right? And it was in a very simplified game state. So like you were saying, yeah, it would be cool to see more of this gone to, maybe more of the polluted. There's a lot of one-ofs. A lot of one-ofs, but there's something that I didn't notice about that DLC winning list from him was that he can play some interesting ratios and understand how the game works. I believe he's like a mathematician too, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, this list definitely looks like it was built in a math lab. Personally, the card I'm still here is one of the new ones from the new set. It is a song inkable 3 cost that says chosen character gains resist to, and you draw a card. I am interested in why only 2. Again, I also like the bare necessities right now. I think with a lot of different decks like location decks and heavy item and ramp sapphire decks, I personally would play 2, 3, maybe even 4 copies.
And Frank's opponent was none other than B. DeCandio playing Amber Steel. So it was an Amber Steel mirror match. He was playing his new kind of aggro tempo version. I don't know. This deck is great though. It looks really cool. I am a fan of Dwarves Mine and Amber Steel. It looks very similar to the list that he was using at the Southside Gaming like quadruple case tournament. It was a huge tournament, like 70 plus players, and that's where he kind of first featured this Amber Steel Dwarves Mine deck. And it looks like there's some updates to it. We have the addition of 2 Kita Protector of Atlantis, which is the Shift Kita. It's a 5 cost inkable, 3 strength, 5 willpower that can quest for 2. And it has this cool ability where when you play it, your opposing characters gain -3 strength until the start of your next turn. So if you're playing an aggro deck, and if you're slapping these locations on, that means your opponent's characters cannot get rid of your characters, which is pretty nice. We have 3 happy, 4 dock for your Dwarves Mine synergy, which I really like to see. Zach, you're an Amber Steel enjoyer. What do you think of this? What do you think of this deck? What do you think of this take on Amber Steel?
Something I do want to mention, Kevin, is that the Kita does make all characters lose the 3 strength, including your own. So something to think about if you decide to challenge something else on the opposing board. Do not play Kita before you do that. However, the deck is a Amber Steel aggro deck. I very much like the way that this deck was built. Dock is a very underutilized card in the beginning of like the Shimmering Skies meta, and I think we're now starting to get its respect, and Dock is getting his flowers, that's for sure. The additions to the deck when he has changed it are making the difference, in my opinion. I didn't think you needed the 4 copies to the happy. However, you are still looking to find the aggressive characters early on, and Pluto just protecting them all on turn 4, being a 5/5 character, is so unfair. The addition to with the amount of removal with the songs, as well as the Dwarves Mine, make any other aggro deck pretty much unplayable.
Yeah, Dwarsbind being a location that kind of like pushes your aggro agenda while also pushing the steel agenda of dealing damage is kind of just broken in my opinion. And everyone knows that you can discard the Lilo from your dock and bring back that Lilo later on by paying 2 ink. So that's some pretty nice synergy there too. So I'm looking forward to seeing more games with this deck from Beta Candio, even though Frank was the winner from their set. Next up, we have the one and only Zack Bivens representing North America with his Amber Steel list. If you don't know Zack Biven, he's a great Lorcana player, has topped multiple DLCs and has acquired first seed at multiple DLCs, which is really hard to do. My number one fear, knock on wood, is to run into Zack Bivens at a big tournament because last round he does not want to split with you. He makes you play so that he can get first seed, and that's very scary, because you can ID into your top cut, which is kind of crazy. So shout out to Zack Bivens, great player. Check out this Amber Steel song list. This is a more traditional take on Amber Steel song, I think. Love the way it looks, very consistent. It looks like Amber Steel is just playing a bunch of new 1-drops now, right? Not new 1-drops, but you guys are playing a bunch of 1-drops now. You got the package of 4 Daisy, 4 Cinderella, and now we're seeing 3 Nala as like a regular occurrence, I think, of this deck. They got the pigs for some aggro aggression, the Piglet Poo Pirate Captain, and the addition of Pluto. If you're not playing Pluto and Amber Steel, what are you doing?
Yeah, personally, the Pluto is just one of the standout cards coming out of the new Azurite C set. He did go over his card choices and about some of the ratios and reasons why he played what he had to play. He is not a fan of Nala and he's not a fan of Piglet. He definitely feels like if he had any other better card to play, he would play it instead. However, the Gaston has been very much a carry in this list, and I am a huge fan of the no shift line Amber Steel decks right now. The songs are still missing in the bare necessities category. I wonder if I'm just wrong now because I saw two goats of Amber Steel decide not to play bare necessities, and I'm starting to question myself. But the card's been good for me, so we never know in variants and everything that applies. But we are looking at 4 Pete and 3 Lawrence and no Naveen's.
Next up, we have fellow Lorcana Goon Dincon Fom representing EU with his classic red, blue, ruby, sapphire deck. But take a look at this, Zach. He is not playing Dig a Little Deeper. No, he took it out. He took it out. He took out his spice. I feel like the meta is too fast for it. I totally understand where you're coming from, DK. Shout out you. Thank you for always representing Team Goons. If you guys didn't know, you can also be like Dincon Fom and us and rep some Goons merch. Check out the link below in the description so you can cop a Goons shirt and support the channel. And another way you can support the channel is by commenting, and subscribing because it definitely supports. But let's get on into this red-blue deck list. We have some new cards that I haven't seen this guy play yet, like Mufasa. Check this out, the 8-cost uninkable that will quest for 4 and re-ready all your inks. So it's kind of like a big kill button in my opinion. Don't know, kind of feels a little overkill, but I mean he's one of the red-blue masters in the game right now, so gotta respect that. We have a lot of ways to ramp, which I love to see. 4 Tipo, 4 Sail the Azurite Sea, 4 How Far I'll Go, but no Fishbone Quill. What do you think of that?
Well, as much as you and I know, we understand that the approach to no fishbone quill has become more of the idea when you're just playing against the non-steel song decks. You're not looking to always ink from your hand. You have Sail the Azurite Sea, and you also have 4 How Far I'll Go. These are cards that have to change the way you build your deck. I do like that there's 4 copies of Develop Your Brain. That's something that I think is not really discussed and not really considered much anymore in the red blue space. However, I think that this card is very good. Finding different options and finding different plays and being able to navigate different lines is what I think is important. Also, something to mention is the amount of items with the Hiram. We're only looking at 2 Vital Sphere and 4 Popsicle and 2 Lucky Dime. That is insane. I'm curious to
Yeah.
how he does it. But yeah, this deck is insane. Kevin, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, man. Like as a personal friend, I want to talk about this one just a little bit more because I feel like I can attest to the way this guy's mind works. And for a cool minute last format, he was even saying like, I don't think we need to play Fishbone anymore. Like I don't think I want to play Fishbone. Like Fishbone is a bad card in a lot of scenarios, and I totally get it because you're ramping with other cards that net you some type of extra advantage. And I don't think like Fishbone is necessarily like power crept because it's always going to be a good card in my opinion with certain strategies, but he's not really trying to utilize his strategy and ink with Fishbone. I think half the time he was probably using Fishbone to draw off of the Flaversham, which is my favorite song, by the way, in Lorcana, the Hiram Flaversham song. But you can go ahead and ramp it easier with How Far I'll Go and cards like Tipo and Azurite Sea because they all do something extra. Tipo has the ability to ink an uninkable from your hand already, and it's a body, so that's 2 for 1, right? Sail the Azurite Sea will draw and ink, so that's 2 for 1. And then How Far I'll Go will give you a card to extra to ink and give you a card to your hand. That's like 2 for 1. So you're just getting the value ink cards in this deck instead, which is really cool to see. And yeah, like you said, the amount of items you're playing with Flaversham, you just gotta see them. Like you just realistically gotta see the Popsicle Flaversham combo like 2 times because once you get to turn Tamatoa, whatever that is for you, you can just get back to Popsicle anyway, so it don't really matter. So I can totally see that, and you're probably like maximizing consistency by playing 4 Visions of the Future with 4 Develop Your Brain. And Develop Your Brain is really good because it costs 1. Like that's so key sometimes, you know what I mean? So I don't know. It's like if you're a Yu-Gi-Oh player and you ask me, do you want to play 4 Pot of Desires and 4 Pot of Avarice in the same deck? Like, oh yeah, give me that. That's crazy. And now we have the cards to do that, which is cool.
15 on inkables, which is insane for a red blue deck. So shout outs to Dincom and anybody that's listening that is kind of wanting to learn red blue and get better at it. He does offer coaching. Reach out to him on his Twitter. Link is down below.
Yeah, man, he's got multiple tops: DLC Toronto, Bologna, Fort Worth, Birmingham, and he got to let it go at Bochum. He's an amazing player. Once again, thanks DK for repping Team Goons at the challenges. It means a lot. Be sure to follow him on social media. He also has a YouTube, and I also know he does Metafy coaching. So his links will be in the description of this video as well. Now we got Kendall, No I'm Not Burdett, one of North America's official Ruby Amethyst ambassadors. As a fellow Ruby Am enjoyer, I'm very excited to go over this deck because I think this list is very top notch, very well trimmed. You know what I mean? There's only 6 1-drops now in his Ruby Am list, which is very interesting. 2 Broom, 4 Chernobog followers, and we're still playing the Flynn Sisu package, which, you know, I think is cool. Arguably a very great curve for this deck. Personally, I am playing more crabs and stuff like that, but Flynn Sisu still just gets you 3 lore, 6 lore, 9 lore sometimes against those Sapphire decks. And we have the addition of the new Genie, this Genie being a Diablo out, being a 2-quester, and a card that can draw you some extra cards, which I think is really good. My biggest concern is that we've upped the uninkable count a little bit. I believe there's 14 uninkables in this deck, so that can get a little tricky, but 2 of them are the Genie, so you're just going to draw some more consistency cards, which I really like. And I feel like this Genie has been putting so much work in this format, right?
Definitely. This Genie is hard to answer. I've noticed a lot of decks struggle to remove this card in the first few turns. And wasting a removal on this does feel kind of bad when you need to be answering cards like Flynn's and Sisu. So you might not even have the removal anymore by the time turn 4 comes down. And it quests for 2 and it's evasive. So if you're not including invasive characters in your deck, then you're going to have a hard time dealing with it. And it's classic Ruby M when we're looking at some clean ratios here. Of course, Kendall Burdett, shout outs to you for taking a dub in Team North America. He did beat his opponent's deck that we're about to show you right now. This is Kendall Burdett's opponent, Bueno S's deck list. He decided to play Ruby Amethyst with a way different approach. We're looking at a complete 180 than Kendall's list. We see no Medusas and no Tremaines, and we're looking at a somewhat of a burn strategy. Now, this deck, my honest opinion, it's going in a lot of different places, and I'm not too sure if I agree with some of the choices. However, I don't consider myself like the best deck builder, so there might be something I'm not seeing. However, I'm personally in any sort of deck I build, I prefer just to go one way or the other, go all in your game plan. And this looks like it has a bunch of different paths, which I know Ruby Amethyst is kind of known for, but green purple usually sticks to the toolbox thing. What would you think about this list, Kevin?
Yeah, it does give me kind of toolboxy burn vibes. So it is very reminiscent of the luxury burn Ruby Am list, which takes advantage of a lot of actions. And there's like a lot of one ofs, like the 1 copy of the White Rose and the 1 friends on the other side. Your draw package in this is just genies and chromacons. But you have a lot of lore burst with the new Maui Shark, you know, which can also every time you play an action you'll get a lore. We also have the Goofy for some extra lore burst. But yeah, just like you were saying, it goes in a lot of different directions and very different than Kendall Burdett's list. Kendall was not playing Bee King Undisputed. He was not playing the Library as well, which are very different, nor Pirate's Life, which will generate you 2 lore and make your opponent lose 2 lore. So like we were saying, a lot of lore burst, but personally, I'm a bigger fan of the Jonathan Ball, burn list, where it's played a lot more of like the action cards that just let you burn a little bit more quicker or to gain lore a little bit faster. But I feel like you can add more White Roses to this, and maybe take advantage of that card a little bit more, or some other cards like Thievery, which I really enjoy. And we actually got a special guest that just tuned in with us. We have Judge Phil, who's been ever so gracious as to judge these online tournaments. Phil, how are you doing? And what do you think of the deck list here?
Oh, I mean, I'm doing great. Thank you for asking. And I think this deck is pretty fun. But yeah, you're right. It is missing a few. Like, it's a little half in, half out. It wants to be the old red purple as well as the new burn version of red purple. So it looks good, but I mean, if you guys watch the games, spoiler alert, if he had a Thievery or one other burn card, he would have won that game 3 turns early, and he didn't, and he missed, and it was a crazy game.
Yeah, the ending of that game was intense because he was literally at 17 lore and he had a Pirate's Life in hand, and he just needed any card from the deck that would have generated him 1 extra lore. And I believe he had triple Chronicon on board. And for like 2 turns, he let Kendall draw 3 extra cards. And Kendall played magnificently. You know, very. You guys need to go watch that video if you want to learn how to play a Ruby-M, like a true Ruby-M enjoyer. Because Kendall just, you know, it looked like it wasn't going his way for the last like 4 turns, and then out of nowhere he just, you know, he found the cards he needed to find, played the goats at the right times, and you know, we were not able to see it on the EU side, that one lore that was missing. So next up we have a very spicy list, a set 6 Mamba Fossa mid-range by Earl Meister. And if you don't know Earl Meister, check out his Twitch streams. He streams regularly, and I've had the pleasure of watching him kind of build this decks from last format, and this is what it looks like now, and it's pretty awesome. It's aggressive, but also kind of not aggressive when it doesn't want to be. We have a lot of early game like the Diablo, the Olafs, Rafikis, and then later on in the game you can start slapping some genies, goats, and rabbits, even play some power cards like Mufasa, Elsa, and Chernobog. So it's a pretty fast deck. I feel like Yellow Purple kind of has that going for you because you have a lot of 2 questers like the Wendy Darling and the 1 copy of Lilo and the Dale, which is pretty nice, which comes in exerted unless you got Chip, but he's still pretty nice because he can quest for 2. He's somewhat overstated is what it feels like, kind of like a bigger version of the Sleepy. And right next to Dale you got Moana, which is an uninkable overstated character. They pretty much have the same stat line. Moana is uninkable, but that is because she does not come in exerted, so that's always pretty cool.
Yeah, the copy of Lilo is kind of interesting, but I get it. You don't want to dedicate too many low-cost characters because you are playing a Mufasa deck. You do want to kind of have some balance. So even hitting something like a Genie or a Peter Pan Shadow Finder isn't bad because even though it comes in exerted, it is an evasive character that doesn't leave play. And it opens up more room for you to kind of navigate some of these different decks that are coming in the meta.
I mean, yeah, I really like the list. I thought it was interesting though, the Olafs. I felt like that wasn't an impact. I think there's many more options, like maybe a Nala in the same slot. Other than that, I think it's a fun list to play. It's another aggressive thing. I really enjoy what Earl's trying to do with the game, bringing these toolbox decks. And I've always loved the idea of a Mama Fasa or Magic Fasa kind of deck.
Yeah, and we even got this Hades that I don't really see played too often in this deck. It's a 6 cost uninkable quest for 3, which is pretty huge. 3 strength, 4 willpower, Hades, Lord of the Dead. Wow, okay. During an opponent's turn, whenever one of your other characters is banished, you gain 2 lore. Okay, so that's pretty aggressive. I almost want to say, imagine adding the new Tiana to this deck. That'd be kind of cool too, right? But a huge shout out to Earl Meister for bringing us some spice like always. I feel like if you want to find some spicy decks, you can always rely on Earl Meister to bring that to a competitive scene. Earl Meister had to play Sailor. Sailor was the winner of that set. Sailor piloting red-blue, which he's very much known for. Sapphire, Ruby, taking I think a very strong place in the meta. We have the Sisu Ice Block version though, and we are playing no Fishbone Quill in this list either. So we're just ditching Fishbone Quill from this meta, Zach. I like to see it. What do you think?
That's something I wanted to point out. We did notice that there was some differences between Dinkon's list and Sailor's list, but something that they both agreed on was the conclusion of removing Fishbone Quill from their deck. We are looking at 1 copy of the Pirate's Life, and we are looking at Ice Blocks like you previously mentioned. And these are some different approaches. You know, we have the Maui Shark, right? And that's something that I think kind of carried him against Earl Meister later in the game. We noticed how much lore was able to gain. The ability to deal with some of the evasive characters like the Genie is what I think is super important. You are playing Ruby cards, so you have a lot of inherent removal, but just to be able to threaten the Genie, prevent that Genie from questing because they have to worry about Maui Shark challenging it and getting an action back, I think is super important. And we are looking at the 1 copy of the Let It Go for that removal. It is looking a lot different, but there was some similar conclusions, just some different ratios.
And only 1 lucky dime, by the way. So I feel like that's a little risky, but Judge Phil, how do you feel? How'd the match go in your opinion?
Oh, the match is crazy. I mean, Sailor played this expertly. You know that this is just something he's played a lot of. And the changes are just great. I think the no Fishbone Quill is fine. I think Sail has really improved on that slot. And then, yeah, the 1 dime is scary, but I feel like we saw how he played it through. He used Maui Shark as like an expert, just like gain extra lore with, you know, how far goes or the visions and stuff like that, and getting those back on quest. It's crazy. I don't think you need the dime. I think the dime is just an extra out. and it's probably one of the worst cards you'll see when you're hunting for another removal. But I think it's fine.
Next up, we have Dale Bolito representing North America with Green Steel. Love to see it. Very reminiscent of a lot of the Green Steel medalists that we're seeing. I'm telling you guys, I think Green Steel is still one of the best decks of the format. Dale Bolito did not win, but it was still a very interesting match. Very close. He had to play against Spessy, who was playing Amethyst Steel, which kind of seemed like a harder matchup against his deck. But in general, I think we have some pretty cool additions to the deck, like Pluto Guard Dog, which I think is a power card right now, man. That 5/5 body when you're staring down cards like Pluto, Prince John, or even the Ursula. Can you imagine seeing twice with Ursula and then playing a Pluto so you can protect the Ursula from getting bopped? It's pretty strong in my opinion.
Yeah, definitely. And we're looking at one copy of Gogo Tamago in this list, which is different than Zan Syed's list. There are some different ratios too. We're looking at 3 copies of Bruno and 3 copies of the Cove, but still on the same copies of Ursula Deceiver. So we are starting to see that card go down in numbers, and I think it might be because there's a little bit of less song decks being played in the meta. 3 copies of Prince John in this deck compared to 4 of Zan's, but overall some pretty standard ways of approaching the deck. We have the Tinkerbell Shift package, and I personally like that more than some of the other cards. But the one thing that I do kind of wish more people were playing is more copies of Anna. I think it's more important than ever now to get rid of some beefy characters, especially with Shark Maui being around. You have to deal with that.
I wanted to cheer USA the whole entire time, so obviously it was a little sad watching Dale not be able to pull it off. But I mean, I feel like the deck's getting there. I don't know if they've done enough testing on set 6. As Zach said, disregarding an Anna is helpful for removal. The lower count on We Don't Talk About Bruno is also very impactful, as that's a card that really should be utilized in this deck, especially with the John. He even removed a John as well. Trying to fit in different things. I just don't know if the lines are all the way there. I mean, one Go-Go is impactful. But obviously, they have to put it in to threaten. I think he said that specifically. The only reason why there's a 1-of right now is just to threaten the lore gain against the blue decks, or even a Shark or something like that. So I think just a little bit more polish on these decks, but we'll see how he plays out in the final rounds.
And the deck lists are public, right? Like both players know exactly what they're playing.
Yeah, everything's open, and that's why he said there's only one Go-Go in right now, because he's not comfortable enough with it. But he put it there because the other players have to respect the fact that it's in the deck.
Yeah, it makes sense. If you know it's in the deck, then you can't just like go willy-nilly with the way you're playing. So it's very important. Very good strategy too. I see a lot of players play 1-ofs for that reason.
Sure, and this is Spessy's list. Played by Spessy. This is Moyen's list that he submitted for the event. Unfortunately, Moyen couldn't make round 1, so Spessy did sub in, and they worked together to actually put this list together, so Spessy could be comfortable playing in the event. So yeah, I mean, we see something just much more aggro-centric, which is a Spessy special, especially for Purple Steel. And then if you watch the event match on Wonderland's Twitch, he had mentioned as well, there's a lot of Moyen touches, the Calhouns and stuff like that.
Love to see it. Love to see 2 homies working together to represent their team. Spessy did take it down in a game 3, I believe. It looked very close. It felt like both players were in a scenario where whoever was going to draw the better cards in that situation was going to take it home. And both players doing awesome plays with these crazy cards, like the 4 copies of Gontu, which can quest for 4. We also see the 4 copies of Genie, the 4 copies of the White Rose, and it kind of felt like at one point Spessy just gained so much lore in the beginning of the game where he was like at 10 lore. He started drawing docks into White Roses, into like Chernobygs and Genies, and like every single character he was playing was just threatening more and more lore. And I could only imagine like how big this Gontu is going to make an impact in the meta now with decks like this, because you're able to just play really aggressive cards in the early game and then still keep control of the board with 4 Fire the Cannons or Crab and Fox, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, something that Spessy did mention too in this deck was the inclusion of not playing 4 docks. Something that I thought, and I want to point out to everyone that's still here with us, that Befuddle is an inkable card that allows you to play almost 4 or 5 copies of Dock potentially. And it's not committing to actually playing the card because you have versatility in cards like Befuddle. And I really think that that's something that's important when you're thinking about deck building and different card choices is how some of the interactions work in different matchups and with your own cards.
Next up, representing North America with Sapphire Steel, we have Jonathan Lamb, aka Lamb Chops, who just recently won a Mickey. Congrats to you, by the way, playing this awesome version of Sapphire Steel with Whole New World. We got some other cool cards in here like Pleakley, Calhoun the Goon, the one-drop Simba, and the shiftable Simba, the son of Mufasa, which lets you pop a location or item on play, which I think is actually pretty good. Kind of better than Wreck-It Ralph Ham Hands, in my opinion, sometimes. But yeah, Sapphire Steel, able to contest every Diablo, and against other Steel matchups, you can play Cogsworth at 4 in this deck, and you can play multiple copies of Grab Your Swords as well. I feel like this is really the only deck that lets you play Grab Your Swords right now in the meta, and that's pretty strong against some ward characters. And we did see it kind of make some big waves against the green-yellow deck that Kawa was playing, but unfortunately we could not get there, and Lamb Chops did lose that round. But awesome deck list nonetheless, right guys?
Definitely. Something that I also think is cool to mention is that both R&B and Lamb Chops had 2 different deck lists when it came to their conclusions into how to build blue steel. So this is something that is very important to mention, I think, because you can play different choices and have a different strategy based on what you're more comfortable with. We noticed that there was Pleakleys, Mr. Sneeze, and different removal cards, as well as only playing 2 sales and you only playing copies. Oh, sorry, only playing one drops like Simba, and we saw different lists play only items as one drop. So I like that this deck list definitely has a different approach. You're also playing 4 Pete, which I think is super important in this meta. I think a lot of different decks struggle against Pete. One of my favorite things is Pete Whole New World, so I come from an Amber Steel perspective there. And Fishbone Quill is seeming to be the only place, Blue Steel seems to be the only place Fishbone Quill fits in nowadays.
Yeah, what's crazy to me about this deck is like I for sure watching that matchup, I thought Lamb had it, but unfortunately, I think today he's got to open up his own construction business because he was just brick after brick after brick. You know, the Whole New Worlds, there was a game where he hit all 4 Whole New Worlds in the top 20 cards. That's insane to me. But otherwise, he played great. I think the deck looks really good. The sails feel right. The fishbones feel right. I think the only thing was Pleakley. He wasn't able to actually utilize it. So I think we'll see in the future matches. I know that's why the Simba is there to set up and allow for a Pleakley target and stuff like that. So we'll see it. We'll see him do better with this, I feel like, in the next round.
And Lamb Chop's opponent, Kawa, did pilot the green-yellow discard song deck. This deck has been in and out of the format since DLC Toronto, where it took down first place by Diego Saz. And this list only includes 1 card from the newest set, Heffalumps and Woozles, which we did see come up in the final game, being a card that didn't allow Tamatoa to quest that turn. This deck kind of hasn't changed, and it seems to be more of a comfortability approach coming from Kawa's perspective. I do know that he has played this deck for about a couple formats now, and it's a very, very strong deck when piloted correctly. It has a lot of different tools, and it pretty much gets to play its own game the later the game goes. However, early on, I've noticed when I've played against this deck, if I just go very aggressive, if I just kind of like always remove characters to not allow them to sing Under the Sea, I can potentially get there. And that's been my biggest point, is that this deck has some flaws and is about understanding what it's trying to do. And it's been trying to do the same thing for so long that I feel like it will be understood of how to beat it more often than not. But we saw Kawa take a game. Kevin, what are your thoughts?
I really like this deck. It's a deck that I personally am always afraid to pair up against at locals because it has the ability to get rid of your entire hand. Also has the only ability in the entire game to commit to a one-sided board wipe, meaning like no matter how many characters are on your side of the field and your opponents, you can always just clear the opponents by using the combination of Kita Under the Sea, which is really easy to resolve with all the ward characters you have as well. So being able to play that on curve, turn 3 John, turn 4 Muses, turn 5 Kita, and then seeing Under the Sea if you had another character other than those. It's really strong, and like you basically have that setup live and ready to go with the way the game pans out. Like Zach said, the longer the game goes, and that's kind of what happened in games 2 and 3. You know, we saw Jonathan be forced to use a whole new world on game 2, and then Cowboy had like 16 cards in hand at one point, like 2 turns later after that, because of the way Diablo interactions work, right? And then game 3, you know, there was just so many opportunities for Cowboy to just keep controlling not only the board but the hand, and then commit to a board wipe. And you know, this song plays many songs, so Muses has many ways to trigger, and being able to bounce your own aerial is definitely something we saw happen. So
I mean, it's pretty Kawa, right? I mean, we've seen him play this list for a while now, and I think the list is good. Just as you guys have said, I think there's a comfortability factor where this list, the more you can understand it, the easier it gets to play around it. But at the same time, this list specifically he doesn't include as many new techs as I thought he would. The Hefflumps and Woozles is great, and if you watch the stream of the game, you'll see him like he just kind of like cheers himself as soon as he tops it with from drawing it from Lamb giving him draws pretty much for drawing from Fortis Spheres off of Diablo, right? I feel like you know, if this deck doesn't get those draws, if your opponent doesn't give you additional draws, in which Lamb did, this deck, you know, possibly might not do that well in future matches.
yeah, a very strong deck piloted by very strong players. All these decks are piloted by very strong players. So huge shout out to everybody. Go follow their social media links down below. I'll try and add as many as possible. There's a couple more rounds to go left, right, Phil? So would you mind just kind of breaking down the tournament structure?
Sure. So we have this is 4 rounds of Swiss, and then, which is crazy because we were trying to schedule that during work days, and you know, I'm scrambling trying to judge these while I'm also working, but yeah, 4 rounds of Swiss into a top 4. So we'll hopefully get those done by, you know, early December, late December.
Cool. So we'll have a Christmas champion is what it's kind of sounding like. Yeah, I'm really excited for that. Zach, how are you feeling about all these lists we went over?
These lists are very, very impressive, but I feel like there are some people that are holding back some of the texts and ideas that they're brewing up because they want to save them for the Continentals coming up in the future months. So keep in mind that there might be some shakeups, there might be some changes, and of course there will be, because the meta and formats change every day. And if you guys aren't subscribed to the channel, you won't keep up with that change, because we're going over tons of meta reviews and tons of other gameplay footage. So make sure you stick around and stay tuned to Lorcana Goons.
All right, guys, remember to like, comment, and subscribe if you want to support the channel. Thanks again, Phil, for helping us out with the second half of this video. Really appreciate it. Anything you want to say before we let you go, Phil?
No, just appreciate you guys, and you know, love everything you guys are doing. Thanks for the opportunity.
Of course, man. Be sure to check out this tournament hosted by Pixelborn. Pavel is an amazing person putting this together. You can find the VODs on multiple social media streamer accounts like Wonderland and Specie, etc. Twitch is going to have them as well as YouTube. So if you want to keep up with those, be sure to follow Pavel on Twitter, because he is posting about them regularly, and join the Pixelborn Discord so you can check those announcements too. Like, comment, and subscribe if you're a Lorcana Goon, and we'll see you Goons next time.